Hi everybody, it's John back here with another model inbox review. Today we're looking at another quite unusual and very unorthodox aeroplane. This is the Focke FW189, and the variant that I'm doing the inbox review model from is an A2 variant, the famous German Uhu or owl. It was often nicknamed as the eagle eye or the flying eye by the German Luftwaffe, and the model I'm actually reviewing today is the original released model of the FW189, the very first kit that ever come out, and I've actually got the first release from Airfix. Now then, we'll take this image off and show you the image of the kit that the kit that I'm actually doing a review on. This is the 1967 red stripe release issue of the Airfix Focke FW189. And it's worthy of note to look at the condition of the parts that are in this photograph, because this model was of course released within the first 5 years of the mould being produced, and every part in that box, as you can see there, is actually crisp, clean, really nice looking parts. But as you get to the later releases, the parts deteriorate in quality quite dramatically, especially with the recent releases. So that's a 67 release on the red stripe box. The next kit that was released was what I call the green logo issue, and this replaced the red stripe box in 1973. Again, the parts inside the box seem to be quite crisp and clean, but there are a few bits of burrs coming in here and there. You can see the flash here and there on those parts. It's interesting to see that. So that's the 73 release, which then gave way to the 76 release, which is what I call the red logo boxing. This is actually a Type 5 box. This was released in 1976. Same size box as the red stripe and the other green logo box, and the kit is still in Series 2. This kit was of course one of the models that was buffed up into Series 3 when they re-released the kit. I think Heller was responsible for doing that, but we'll see in a minute. 1978. The Air Combat Collection was released by MPC. This is, of course, America's release agent for Airfix models. And the interesting thing about this particular kit is that it has completely different decals, and it includes a flying crew. I mean, there are pilots in the Airfix kit, but there are actually crewmen that are included in this particular kit, and it's an interesting ad. I don't know how they did this, and they might have probably produced a different sprue producing those crewmen, but the pilots are already on the sprues anyways. That's 1978 MPC American release. Then you go to 1980, and this was the first time the box was increased in size. It's still a Series 2 kit, and this also was the year that Airfix went over to the oblong shape logo for their models. It's more planetoid shape rather than circular. Still the same image on the front of the box. So that's 1980. 1980 gave way to 1981, and you're probably thinking to yourself, well, isn't that the same box? Yeah, it is, but it's the same image on the box, but Airfix did a serial number change in 1981, and I think they added a 7 into the serial number, so it became 023071 instead of 301, and that was the main reason for the reboxing. I don't really understand why that happened, but it did. It's an issue. But same decals, it's exactly the same kit as a 67 release. Then you go into 1986, and this is when Palitoy took over the company. I'm sorry about the image of this picture. It's the only decent picture I've got of the Palitoy box that will actually come out on my computer. The rest are Prestine images, and they won't come out. But Palitoy were famous for having images of their kits made up on a blueprint. It's not always certain to ascertain whether the blueprint even had anything to do with aviation or anything to do with the aircraft subject. Because that particular blueprint could be anything, couldn't it? It could be a London bus, I don't know. But that's Palitoy's rendering. That was 1986, and Palitoy sold the company to Heller and Humbrol in 1987, and this was the first Heller Humbrol boxing release. It's an unusual image on the front of the box because they changed the decals for the kit, but they also had this rather awful looking image of the FW189, which really the model inside the box is actually 20 times more accurate than the image on the front. And Hella Humbrol bumped the kit up to Series 3, as you can see there. It's definitely a Series 3 kit. So this kit started to cost consumers more money at this point, and it was put into a larger box to reflect the Series 3, but the kit inside, I mean, don't bear me wrong, the kit inside is actually quite a sizable aircraft. It's quite a sizable model. The wingspan on this plane was quite large, but I don't think it warranted boosting up to Series 3 like so many other Airfix kits. When Hella and Humbrol bought the company, they boosted their series up from Series 1 to 2, Series 2 to 3 and 3 to 4. But there you go, that's 1987, Humbrol Hella first rendition. 1991, Humbrol and Hella sold a lot of the Airfix moulds to a company called Bilek, and Bilek released this kit under a catalogue number C20. It's the FW190A, but it is still the A2. Different transfers and different versions there. I think the alternative version for this kit is of a Bulgarian aircraft that served both for the Luftwaffe and against the Luftwaffe in various stages of the war. The other interesting thing that you don't normally see in a kit that's on general release are swashstickers on the decals, but there they are. There they are in their prowess. Great, isn't it? So that's 1991, and then you get the final release, which is 2009. This is the Hornby Productions Limited, of course. Again, two different versions in this kit, and it's in the red boxing image, which you see generally every day, like now in the shops as Airfix release their kits on these red boxes. So that's the boxing history, 2009. I'll leave you with an image of the FW189 in combat during World War II. And then what I want to do is I want to just, if I can, bring the camera over to here and drop the camera down onto the table, and then hopefully you'll see the model that I'm reviewing today. This is the kit I'm reviewing today, the Series 2 Focke FW189. It's the A2 variant, even though it's not stated, and it's Series 2, serial number 267. This is the first release, red stripe box, Type 3 boxing that Airfix released in 1967. The interesting thing about the Airfix kit is that the Airfix kit was the first release by anybody in any scale of the FW189. They were the first company to release this model on the market. And we'll just, before I open the box, I just want to go through a couple of things. On the sides of the red stripe boxes, they always advertise some of their other kits. This particular one's got the Ferry Swordfish, which was actually the Mark III with the rocket projectiles. And they had the Hawker Hunter, which was in that rendition the F6, as used by the Black Arrows. And on the other side, you've got the GR Mark I Harrier, which was the first generation, not only the first generation Harrier, but the first generation model Airfix Harrier. And then you have the OV-10 Bronco, which the last video that I did incorporated quite a lot of information about this kit. If you can get a hold of that kit, it's actually half decent. It's a nice little kit. So we'll open the box so you can have a look inside, see what the score is. We'll just put, I'll flip it upside down so I can put the parts into here. Now I'll know they're still all there. Right, first things first, instruction leaflets. Inside the instruction leaflet you get, in the late 60s rendition of Airfix kits, you get what's called a complaint slip. These are starting to become collectible, but it's got Airfix's original address. Airfix Productions Limited, Department C, Haldane Place in London, SW18. They did move to another address later in the 70s. I think it was to a place in Hounslow. But their original address, headquarters, was in London. Now then, Airfix instruction leaflet. This is a very typical Series 2 Airfix instruction leaflet. I did do a video on an inbox review for the Airfix Dauntless a couple of months back, and it had a similar instruction leaflet to this. But this is very typical of Airfix. The instruction leaflet folds out to something in between A5 and A4. It's not quite A4 size, but it's certainly bigger than A5. And you've got the history of the aircraft in 3 different languages there, German and French, general instructions in German and French as well as English, and then you've got a few key codes here which give you instructions during the build of what type of parts they are, what to do with them, what not to do with them, and alternative parts, because all of those keys are incorporated in this kit. The kit builds up into 5 different steps, with a 6th step being the paint guide there, and the instructions to where to place all the decals. I always find it funny calling them decals, because when I was younger, and me and my brother used to build kits, we always called them transfers. We always did call them transfers. But I seem to be calling them automatically decals now. Basically, section 1 is the interior, which comprises of two crew members, the pilot and the radio operator. And the section 2, you put the interior into the fuselage halves, and you've got 2 little windows that go inside the fuselage halves, and then you've got a rear gunner and a gun, which points. I think that actually does elevate inside the rear cockpit there. And then section 3, you fit various bits and pieces which include the majority of the glazing. There is an optional part here. You can either have the rear gunner's position in the open position or in the fully coned closed position. And then you've got a mid-upper gunner here, which goes, I think that goes through the top gun slot, the top gun slot in this middle section here. So that's up to the first three sections. Section 4 is basically assembling the airframe, the wings, tail booms. It's a twin tail boomed aircraft, similar to the Bronco in fact, although it's a mid-wing application airframe and not a high wing. The engines in the FW189 were quite interesting because it was powered by Argus air-cooled 6-cylinder inline engines, and they were very reliable, not very powerful, but very reliable, and they were very economical as well, and gave the FW189 quite good range. And you've got a tail piece there, plane that goes in between the 2 fins. And then section 5, you're basically putting the undercarriage and the armament fit into place. Again, you've got an option here for either having the undercarriage in the lowered position or the raised position with closed doors. And you even get an optional part at the back here for the retracted tail wheel. Can you see that? Part 66. But the wheels in the lowered position, the main wheels do rotate, which is, yeah, I suppose it's an added bonus, isn't it? And on the bottom you've got a paint guide, which is very easy to follow, although some of the paint guides in the early Airfix kits were a little bit confusing here and there, because a lot of the keys to the different colours, some of them were a bit difficult to differentiate, but this one is much clearer than some of them. The underside there is actually a matte 25, which is a typical Luftwaffe light blue, sky blue for there, and then you've got the 2 different greens. You've got the Donkel green, which is the lighter green, and the dark green, which is which makes up your splinter style camouflage for the German Luftwaffe aircraft. And this plane is actually fitted with yellow outboards to the wings underneath, which means it's probably a Soviet theatre aircraft. That's the FW189's plans, so we'll put them back in there. Put the complaint slip back in here, and then next we'll quickly deal with the lack of transfers that there are in this kit. One of the first things that I've noticed about the transfer sheet on this particular kit is that it's not very professional, is it? Let's turn it up the right way so you can see what I mean. The other thing that I find interesting is that the transfer sheet tells you that the aircraft is an A2 variant, although it's the only time, apart from the instructions, there's no evidence of it on the box to tell you what variant it is. But this is the full transfer sheet. There is only decals for one version, and again, in as of typical of 1967 standards, there's no swastikas anywhere on the transfer sheet. But there might not be many decals, but the transfers, they're not that bad in terms of rendering. The crosses, they're quite, the register on them is quite good. The clarity of the cross is quite good. The backing film on them isn't so good. And that's probably typical of 67 issue decals. So that's your decal sheet. Not much to write home about, are there? But it's not, the actual backing paper isn't even square. I found that quite funny. Next, the parts. Now, I did have a comment on a previous video about somebody saying that I spent too much time on the parts. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of take heed of his comment because I found it quite constructive. I wouldn't say it was negative, but it wasn't positive, but it was constructive criticism of my videos. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the main parts out. And I'm going to show you all of the sprues, but I'm not going to go through them in heavy detail. But what I am going to do is I am going to bring them up to the camera so that if you want to look at them, you can freeze the video and study them at your own leisure. That's the bit I wanted to look at. Right. As with most Airfix kits of the 60s and 70s, you get a rather nice display stand. These are actually becoming collectible, but one thing that I did find interesting was that Humbrol Productions have started releasing box sets of these stands, and they are exactly the same stand as you get here, but obviously in the earlier days you got it free. So that's your base stand. Here is your transparency. Now I just want to quickly go through what I normally go through with the transparencies. The sprue has all the parts on the sprue, which is nice. It's nice that they've lasted on the sprue this long. You've got two navigation lights here, which go under the wings. You've got your optional parts rear gunner. There's the forward canopy, which is like a greenhouse canopy, you can see there. And that's your rear section upper glazing and your mid section upper glazing, which has the slot for the machine gun there, you see. Now then, the thing I just wanted to quickly explain, sorry, before I do that, you've got two tiny wing lights. Don't know if you can see them. I'll bring it up to the camera, you can see them a bit clearer there. Two tiny wing lights, and they are very small. So care and attention will have to be made when you remove those and also fit into the kit. Now, the one thing I can say about these parts is they are actually quite clear. Even bearing in mind the 1967 release, they're quite nice actually, except for that forward piece. The forward piece doesn't seem to be as clear as the rest. I don't know if you can see that. It is quite clear. You know, it's going to give you a good result. But the thing about it is that it suffers from all the entire glazing. You cannot see my prints through that. You can see my finger very clearly. So you're going to need to paint the interior, even if you just darken it down. But you are going to need to paint the interior. But an awful lot of the detail that you're going to get is not going to be highly visible through that glazing. Now then, that's one of the undercarriage wells. There, just very quickly do that. That's the interior floor pan for the canopy, for the cockpit. That's that part. Whoops, sorry about that. That's one of the engine cowlings. Very quickly. This is another undercarriage well. They also form the doors in the undercarriages in the lowered position. I just want to take these parts that sort of have their own sprue, keep them separate, and then we'll go through. There's a couple of parts loose off sprue here. That's one of the undercarriage oleos. You can see that there. That's one of the undercarriage oleos, quite easy to recognise. And this is a floor section to the cockpit that also incorporates two, I can only assume they're types of vents, or maybe rams or something, I'm not sure, maybe avionics. Early avionics tended to be quite large, especially in World War II. Right, let's get these loose parts out of the way. I'm just basically going to show you the sprues up close And then if you want to freeze the video, you can freeze the video. But we'll talk about the quality of the parts when I go through the main airframe parts. But here's another sprue. This is the second sprue there. Good riveting detail. The engine detail seems quite good as well. Some of the armaments fit and pylons there. Get it in focus for you. There you go. And that's the mid-wing section that the airframe sits on the top of. If I can get that in focus for you. You can see the riveting detail quite nicely. And this is the fourth. Is it the fourth sprue? I think it's the fourth sprue. Yeah, nice. They're nice parts. Pilot figures are quite nicely rendered. I quite like the fact that the pilots are typical Airfix pilots from the 60s. They didn't do a bad pilot. A lot of people think that their pilots are pretty poor. The only issue I've got with this guy is that he needs a wheelchair when he gets out of the plane, doesn't he? He hasn't got any legs, the poor guy. I hope his plane doesn't get shot up because he'll never get out of that. Even with a parachute on, he'll never be able to get it on, will he? Right. The fuselage on this kit is of course quite small, and it is on the one of the sprues. Now then, the tail booms. I can quickly show you the tail booms. I'll quickly show you, like, here we go. There's two there. Quite nice tail booms. Quite nice riveting on them. The interiors bland, but the location pins are quite evident. Same again with these two. Quite nice. Riveting detail on them is quite nice. Now, I want to go through the riveting detail. I'll just show you these. That's the lower wings. You can see the riveting detail on them there quite nicely. And that's the upper wings. That's starboard wing. And that's the port wing. Now then, I'm going to show you, I think I'll show you, it's best shown on the lower wing, because the detail on this kit, on the surface of this kit, is actually quite substantial. As you can see there, there's a lot of rivets on this kit, an awful lot of rivets, but they'll sand down quite nicely, and you know, I don't think it's a bad option to sand them down, but they're not terrible, are they? The impression on the flap there, the inner flap and the aileron, sorry, has recessed indentations to show the limits of the flaps and ailerons, which is quite nice. I also think it's quite nice that you have to bore out the holes for the bomb racks that go under the wing, because a lot of the time FW-189s just did reconnaissance missions. They didn't do reconnaissance bombing missions, although obviously a lot of the time they did, but they weren't always, the bomb racks weren't always fitted to these aircraft. So that is a sort of an option that has been incorporated into the kit, and I quite like the fact that it's been incorporated into the kit, and you don't need to fit the bombs if you don't want to. But the actual quality of the rivets and the panel lines on this kit is actually quite good, and it's not overdone. The rivets are a bit heavy, but they will sand down quite nicely, and that's sort of on it's evident on all of the parts. There's the rudder there, and again the rivets, yeah, the rivets are heavy, but they'll sand down quite nice. But there's something else I want to talk about with the booms. You'll have to do this with all of the booms, because there are two mounting straps here. They're bulkhead panels which are built into the airframe that help strengthen the tail and the overall airframe itself. But the problem with them is that they're a little bit big. They're not too wide, but they're a little bit too pronounced, as you can see there. But they will sand down quite nicely, and if you sand them down, they'll become incredibly accurate. It's a bit like when you do, I did a review recently on the Typhoons, the 3 Typhoons I'm building for the Buddy review, and that suffered from a similar fate, because the fish plate retrofit that were put onto the Typhoons is often recreated on model form, too heavy, and it just needs sanding down. In some cases, like with the Marquee kit I had, it needed sanding down quite a lot. So that's the model inbox review sorted. The parts are very nice. I like this kit. I've never built the FW189. My brother built this kit when I was very young, but I've never built it. So I'm looking forward to building it, and it has a lot of nostalgic feelings for me, this particular kit. I just want to go through the information on the model and give you the options that are available and the costings. The model review is on the Airfix 1/72 scale Focke FW189 Mark A2. Its release date was 1967 and the model serial number was 267. The kit comprises of 58 grey plastic parts and 9 clear parts on 8 grey sprues and 1 clear sprue, making 67 parts in total. Sorry, that's not true. It's 67 parts in total. That's correct. Yeah. The dimensions of the kit, again, these are approximate because it's virtually impossible to measure the dimensions of this model until it's put together. But I did go off the true measurements of the real aircraft and reduce them 72 times to produce these figures. So the length of the kit is about 6.5 inches. The span is 10 3/4 inches, and the model stands 2 inches high on its undercarriage. Right, options and costs. Right, this is interesting. The Airfix kit, obviously, as you saw from the boxing history, also was released by MPC in America and by a company called Bilek. Now, Bilek is a company that have actually purchased quite a lot of old mould Airfix kits, and I've got another one in my stash, which is the DO17 D&E. But I do know they did do a version of the old Blenheim, they've done a version of the old Defiant, and they've done a version of the old Hamden. There's probably an awful lot more other versions of Airfix kits out there as well. But when you buy a Bilek kit, the build-up of the sprues inside have been drastically hacked, let's say, so that the kit will not look entirely like an Airfix kit from the outside, but believe me or not, they're the same sprues, same parts, same detail, quality, everything. They're identical. The Airfix kits, the MPC and Bilek models, they range, and these are sales prices, these aren't what people are trying to get and never have a hope in hell of getting. The kits range from about £3.50. I've seen a couple go for £3.50, and they go up to about £15. There are 2 other models on the market, although if you looked at the list, you'd think there were 5 other models on the market, maybe 6 other models on the market. But ICM released a kit in about it might even be 2001. I think ICM released their 2001 kit, and the moulds were licensed, produced by a company called MPM. And because they were produced by ICM, there's another company called Condor, which also released the kit, and Italieri and Rivets released the kit. It doesn't surprise me that Rivets released the kit because Italieri released the kit, but MPM and ICM have a close relationship with one another, and I've got a feeling that Italieri are the European sales agent for MPM. So that's why Rivets have got all of the kit as well. But the ICM kit is what's found inside all the other 4. The ICM kit is newer moulds. It's probably slightly better in terms of quality, but from what I've heard from other people's reviews, especially professional modelers who work for the IPMS, that have put reviews up on the web, they're stating that the Airfix kit, although it was an original release, is no worse in quality and overall accuracy than any of the other 72nd scale renditions, including the MPM and ICM models. So although the MPM and ICM models don't often go for as cheap as the Airfix and Bilek kits, they never go for much more. Their sales prices range from between £7 and £15. But there's also another company from Japan that have released an FW189, and this is an original kit. It's not a spin-off from the other 2. It's a company called Aoshima, They're not very well known, but they do a lot of very nice kits. I think they have close relations with another company called Otaki, but I haven't seen any Otaki kits that were manufactured by Aoshima, but I have seen a few Aoshima kits that were manufactured by Otaki, which is quite interesting. So maybe Otaki is another agent that sells models for them on their behalf. So that's the 3 different kits available in 72nd. The Aoshima kit ranges from £4 to £10. In 148, which is a seriously large model, as I said before, the FW189 had a 50-foot wingspan and it measured about 42 foot long, I believe. So the plane isn't small. In 48 scale, it's going to be quite a sizable kit. There are 2 companies that build a 48 scale model. There's a company called MPM, and they release one for between 25 and 40 quid. And there's also the kit which, according to a lot of the model reviews on the web, is the kit that you should be looking for in 48 scale. It's the Great Wall Hobbies model. And funnily enough, it starts at about the same price. It usually retails between 25, maybe 26 quid. But it only goes up to about £35. I've never seen it sold for more than that. But 48 scale isn't the biggest scale you can get the Yoo-Hoo in. You can actually get a model from HPH in 1/32, and this kit is absolutely enormous. It's not quite as big as the 32nd scale HE111, but it ain't much smaller. And it retails for between £45 and £60. So if you want a large scale unusual subject, the HPH kit isn't a bad option. Now then, conclusions. The Airfix kit is Rivet City, and some of the mouldings are a little on the large side, but, and this is a big but, the kit is very accurate and was the first FW189 kit release, so don't be persuaded by the newer release kits, as they are just the 2001 release ICM kit, and the quality is not much better. And with a little sanding down of the mouldings and the rivets on the Airfix kit, it's a really good option. So don't be put off by the age of the model. It's actually a half decent kit. I have heard, again from reviews on the web, that the model suffers from no difficulty in fits issues, but you have to be very careful about aligning all the parts when you're constructing the airframe. But the majority of the airframe is constructed all at the same time in step 3 or step 4, I think it's step 4. So when you're gluing the wings, the tail booms and the tail plane and the fuselage and everything all together, make sure that you align it whilst the glue is setting, and then you shouldn't really have any issues with the fit. And as far as I know, there isn't actually an awful lot of filling and sanding to do on this model either, because the fit is actually that good. Overall accuracy is excellent, provided you sand down those strengthening bands on the tail booms and get rid of some of the height on the rivets. The kit is a really good option. So if you fancy an FW189, get yourself out there. Once again, if you like the video and you like what you see, give me a like. Haven't subscribed, give me a subscription. I really appreciate new subscribers, and I really appreciate your comments. Good or bad, I will try and answer as many as I can that require questions answered. But again, I'll speak to you again with the next video, lads. Bye for now.